Did you really hear what I told you, baby? 'Cause you ain't act like you did. Girl, tell me what is that about? Now it's like I don't even know you, baby. I just only wanted to hold you, baby. Leaving wasn't my decision. Girl, you made up your mind. Heard you was looking for me. What's up? Don't know what you wanted to be, but I know one thing. Girl, I put you on to something that you never had before. Heard you was looking for me. Can't find me. Thought you were the one that I needed. I can't stop it.
Mic check 1 2. Welcome back. If this is your first time here, welcome to the King Status Podcast with me, your host, Mr. Mortar King, along with
Give it some space. Hey, Mr. Prolific, aka Jay Duce.
If
I
Do Say So.
myself.
Welcome, and please remember to like, comment, share. Well, I said it backwards. I said, and if you haven't already, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And if you haven't noticed already, we have a special guest in the building, content creator, event host, podcast host, Keep It a Beam podcast, teacher,
Musician. Yes.
black man.
Yes.
He's been that all his life.
Hey, yo.
Welcome, my brother Marquise.
Yo, thank you. I love
Good.
the intro. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Good.
The More and More Show.
Good dude, man. Good dude. We've been having a lot of laughs in here already. This is the
Yes.
first day we formally met, but we've been all in here joking, all of us,
Real quick.
including Sin City in the back. we've been we've been having a good time in here. Good time. How y'all fellas doing today? How
I'm
y'all
good,
doing?
man. I'm good. How you?
I'm good, man.
It's chill Sunday, honestly and truly. Had a little bit of a chaotic night last night, and then I reset this morning, enjoyed my coffee, and now I'm here.
Yeah, man. he had this post the other day. He sent it and was like, "How are you pouring into yourself on this Saturday?" I said the
Yes.
other day, like it was yesterday.
Yesterday.
But it was definitely like I was like, man, you know what? These are the type of people I want to be around. Like
Yeah.
like where it feels like, oh, he cares about the well-being of each other, but it's even more important for us as black men. And I feel like, but thank you for being here, man. We appreciate
Nah,
you.
thank you for having me, for real. I'm dead excited to be here. Like, thank you.
Man, so why, like, let's just go right into it,
Yeah.
man.
Also,
Like,
congrats on being the first guest of 2024.
oh,
man.
congrats.
First
Yeah,
guest of
absolutely.
2024.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hey, yo.
Come on, man. But so why is it, because we've been talking a lot off camera about just some things, but why is it important for us as black men to come together like this and share our creative spaces together?
Oh, man, especially, I think it's a possibility model is kind of what I look at it as. Like, I don't know if we model what collaboration, what sharing space looks like, what just a real casual dialogue can look like, especially amongst black men. I think they kind of see what's portrayed on television a lot of the time, and sometimes that's just not our reality, right? But when you can
Most of the time, that should be pure, just somebody who is not of a culture, just taking their eyes on the lens and what they consume from their own other peers who do put up different shows, TV shows, movies of the culture, and they take that image and run with it as it's the image of us.
Nah, facts. And so for me, a lot of what I'm trying to do, especially like collaborating and being a lot more explicit with having more black men on my show that are all from different facets of my life, and being able to partner and collaborate with other black men is showing like, oh, you don't only have to look one way to do this thing. And I'm always big on that, like teaching my students, my nephew, like success does not look one way. How we show up does not look one way. I said, just because I have a degree and I teach does not make me any better than anybody who's like works at a window factory. You feel me? And so like, do you know how to meet?
Specific. Shout out to the window factory.
Yeah.
Yo, Jay, I really thought the same thing. I was like, man, I never heard nobody throw that one out.
You know, just something out here.
Shout out y'all.
Okay,
Thanks for
we
y'all
appreciate
listening.
y'all. But I think that's, for me, was always important because I've had so many friends who have shaped how my outlook of life has been, and it's always, as long as like there's a mutual respect and we can model that, especially like with content creation and podcasting now, absolutely can show exactly how the breadth of what black men can look like and present as, and also see that we can still show up for each other. So to me, I think it's just a possibility model, but this is how we show up together.
You gotta
So you mentioned that you teach. How'd you get into teaching? Like,
It was an accident. A whole accident. I did not want to be a teacher. I actually went to school for theater and broadcasting.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so that was I was a double major. I was just like, I'm gonna end up in New York. I'm gonna do this, da 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 da. And then found out. I was just like, I got out. I was a full-time social media and content creator. I mean, content consultant. And then I was just like, this is miserable. I'm not a task-driven person. Like, I need something that's purpose-driven for me. And so
Okay.
it's the first time I ever quit something without a plan after the fact. And then my friend was like, yo, Keith, there's this job at Penn. It's a summer program. It's about social impact in STEM and getting black and brown kids involved. So, like, you should try it. You don't got a job. They pay for housing and food. Might as well. And so a week later, I found myself in Philly and I fell in love with teaching, and especially just like the possibility of like, oh, I did not have this as a my teachers did not provide me this all the way.
Right.
And so what it's like for me to be able to enter a space, and what I realize education does allows me the space to mentor young people and also let them know like there is at least a trusted adult who cares for you, who looks like you too.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, man, that's dope. And then the broadcasting, of course. Now it makes more sense of everything, even the theater, everything about it. It just fits now with everything that you are pursuing and what you're doing, even in the podcast space, and just knowing, like, of course, like podcast etiquette, anything, and like just audio. So, why is that important as a black man? Even more, like, if you could just go more in depth of why, like, it is important of your role in teaching young males that look like us and making sure that you're there, like how you said, for your nephews and everything.
Yeah. It's man, if we get to like a more granular space, it is like one, the environment we grow up in. And so for me growing up, I did not get to see this level of camaraderie around. I did not see us growing up and growing old, right? And so
Got a point.
Yeah, so for me, I was just like, dang, there was a point in time in high school where I'm just watching different men die every month. Like of my 9th grade year. And I was just like, dang, yo, this is wild. And so for me, I realized like the place, like the Olivets was important to me because the Boys and Girls Club gave me a space to be after school, gave me a space to find mentorship and find help and assistance. And so from there, getting into education, I had realized that it's less than 2% of black men who occupy the space.
Right, man.
And when I realized, and I think the number actually went down, so we're probably at 1.7% of us in the education space. And so for that, that's difficult because now I have to enter into a space where young black boys don't know whether to look at me like a mentor, look at me like a big bro, look at me as a father figure. Right. And so I had to step in and was just like, no, I am here to ensure that you are getting delivered instruction and having to be all of those things at one time, right? And so it was a different level of having to attain a certain level of respect from our students, but then also letting them know, like, I'm here for them. And so when they see me show up every single day, not as a disciplinary, not as a dean, and nothing against like deans and stuff, but like that's a disciplinary position, right? Not as security, not as a janitor, none of that, right? You showed me somebody who is in front of me every single day, teaching me to the world that I'm going to grow up in. That's going to be important because now what I have seen is a lot of my students felt like they'd never seen somebody like me before. And so they walk in and it's much like the studio, like, it's green everywhere. There's jazz music playing in the background. Like, I'm real chill. They be like, yo, Mr. Rich, you like an Erykah Badu kind of guy. Like, yo, you don't even know. I said, what do you know about Erykah Badu, first and foremost?
She don't know nothing.
But I had realized they had gotten to a space, and I'm really big in like social and emotional learning. So like the SEL practices, like just your life skills, your emotional development, regulation. And so anytime like students enter the space, and mind you, I worked at an all-boys high school. And so for me to average 20 to 25 black boys coming up to me like, yo, Mr. Rich, I can't start my day without a hug. I need a hug today. Can I just chill in your room to decompress? And like giving them that space to be was so important for them to really understand, like, one, what does it look like to have and build an emotional vocabulary? What does it look like to get this emotional safe space from a black man? and then also to be able to teach them how to talk through their emotions, right? And so a kid, and these kids are big now. I said I'm 6'2", and like I'd be like, oh, bro,
Man,
back up.
you're right. You're right.
But I look at them now, and this kid was like, yeah, Mr. Rich, you bitch ass nigga, da 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 da. I should smack it. And I said, did I ever raise my voice to you?
Mm-hmm.
Have I ever called you out your name? Do I cuss at you? I haven't done any of that. I said, you're not going to disrespect me, so we can have a conversation about that.
Right.
But I said, in this moment in time, what do you need? Did I do something to upset you? Are you uncomfortable with what you're learning right now, what I'm asking you to do? Do you need a walk? Do you need to put your head down? Do you need water? Are you hungry? Like, I just asked them these questions, like, what do you need? But they have difficulty answering that question because they are not given the space to, like, know how to exercise it.
Right, man.
And so, though it's important, it's a much longer road to take because sometimes I'm asking them to self-actualize in a space that they may not be doing at home, where parents aren't giving them the opportunity to speak,
man.
right?
Exactly.
And so it was definitely my long way of saying, like, it's important to see this space be modeled, whether it's in a podcast format or whether it's in a classroom, of like, what does emotional safe spaces look like, and how can I nurture that skill more and more, so by the time you leave my classroom, by the time you leave high school and college, you now know, when I'm angry, I need this. When I feel this, I need this, or I need to do this, right?
And I think that, and well, not I think, like I love your answer, and I love like everything you say and your method with it, because this is what this show is about as well. It is trying to help, like being cool with being vulnerable as well, and like showing, hey, I'm a black man, and like we're from this society, but we don't have to be this, and we can really, like, some of us drop tears on here in the episode. So and it's like we're learning how to deal with those emotions, and not everything that we saw was the right way. And then, like how you said, they're not being spoken to the right way at home, and we're definitely when they're not getting the space to where they can have a voice. So and I know what it's like to grow up like that, pretty much. This is why I say, when people like me, my doing podcasts is my way of, hey, I never was able to have a voice, so now I'm gonna have a voice, like, and this is how I want to use it. And then how I do it also in my household with my daughter. I'm raising a daughter, and how it's like, but and giving her the space, allowing her to have the space to, hey, you can talk, hey, you can. It's okay to be frustrated, but it's not okay to just throw temper tantrums and be a certain type of way. Like I tried the gentle parent thing.
No.
Like, I definitely
No, but it's appreciated too, because it's like difficult, because it's something, especially our generation, we're learning to implement with the next generation. And so it's not like we get it perfect. There's some parents who are just like, I want to do gentle parenting, but they forget that gentle parenting requires an understanding of consequence. And so it becomes more permissive parenting, and being like, well, they're going to have to feel their emotion. Let them get away with whatever, Because you are trying to overcorrect what you grew up with. But in reality, we got to find like that perfect balance of affirmation and accountability in order to really be like, nah, this is what gentle parenting actually looks like. But gentle parenting does not absolve the child of consequences.
Because the one thing I definitely
put that perfectly. I want to say you put that perfectly. It's a great way to explain gentle parenting in a way so people can understand that it's not just letting your child get away with murder.
Right.
Yeah. Because one thing I definitely say, like, I will not tolerate disrespect. I was like, but that does not. As long you don't have the right to disrespect me, but I also don't have the right to disrespect you in any type of way.
Damn, you sound like you from the South right there. I do not tolerate disrespect.
No, I'm saying, like, it's just
that's
like,
where my family from. I get it. Like,
no, I get it. More than I get it. It was
just like as a parent, it's just like, no, you can't just have your way and everything, and you got to understand, because, and I'm trying to show you as well, hey, life is going to hit you a lot harder, and they're going to be a lot more brutal. I do this because I care. So especially, like, even with my nephews and like the younger guys that I may be around, I tell them that I'm like, hey, I want to give it to you like this. And on the show, I want to give it to you honestly, because nobody's coming to save us, especially guys that look like us. So we have to elevate and develop and show that we can connect in these type of ways and come together, and not always have the crab in the barrel mentality. And like, hey, there are ways we can elevate, because we're a lot more dangerous when we stand together.
Because ain't nothing more dangerous than an educated black man who knows his worth.
Yep.
Stay dangerous, my brother. Stay
Well,
dangerous.
first kind of disagreement today. I think I agree with the most part, but that idea of that the world is going to be so cruel and hard to you, kind of for me is my goal is to, as a parent, is to better in myself throughout all the things I do, so that your world is not the world that I see, and you're going to see things through a different lens and understand it through a different lens. Now, I go back to like I was talking to her this morning about Will and Jaden and Willow and how their upbringing was real non-traditional, real with their parents, and they turned them into non-traditional human beings. So no, the world may be mean to them, but they understand cruel is maybe cruel in a sense, but their way of adjusting to it and taking in and expressing themselves is at such a high level because of the wealth of self they were raised into. Like I am Jaden Smith, cuz he don't play at all about when it comes. If you ever seen an interview with him, he's never that person.
Yeah, and he has the safety of his wealth too, right? Like, so he can be able to like do that because his wealth protects him too, as opposed to somebody like one of our kids growing up. And I think high key Gen Z, Gen Alpha are actually getting more space to like expand like who they want to be and like what authenticity feels like for them. And there's still spaces where like we still go back to what traditional norms are for like a lot of young people. And so something I always say when I'm hearing is like, as a teacher, I try to teach to the world that they're going to grow up in, not to the one that I knew. And because that forces me to have to be humble in terms of like how I approach talking to them, and I have to stay curious with the kids rather than having to just be like, well, this is what I've known my whole life and da 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 da. Yeah, the world is still going to be rough because the stove is still hot. So there are things that you will be learning. And I think the other piece is understanding that the concessions that we had to make growing up are not the concessions that our kids have to make growing up.
And the understanding of what it is to live a comfortable life. Because you mentioned their wealth, but I think it's more of them having, yes, they are very wealthy. I'm not taking it away from them, but I think in our kids and different kids, you can teach your kids a different understanding about the relationship between money and what it means. Like I think a lot of our kids are raised with a struggler's mindset. Like we struggle, so we're raising our kids to either get all the money and not worry about nothing else. And that results in different types of just dependence and reliance on the fact of money. I love that they're wealthy, but I also think in the way they were parenting, if you were able to create a life where, let's say a nomad lifestyle, where your kids with you every day, they learned a different life.
Right.
So like even how they interact with people, they've met somebody probably in the nomad lifestyle where they don't know them, maybe doesn't speak the language, but you can see kindness or you can see anger, and you understand that these things have nothing to do with me. And when you kind of travel through those places, and a lot of times we'll take on emotions of everything we feel because we're all trying to make it. It's that like I gotta get out of this mentality. When even in, I feel like I've had friends growing up, even in the most toughest households and where things are at their worst, there's love, there's light, and that kid doesn't operate out of a place of that my circumstances are horrible. Sometimes as a kid, you don't find out your circumstances are horrible until you get to school. Like until you see somebody else with, oh shit, those are new Jordans. Damn, I didn't even think about that. Oh, I think, oh, what you eating for lunch? Damn, that's crazy. You got cheesesteak. It's 2:00.
But I think not so much as what they see in their own household. That's kind of where I was going with it. Like to your point where you said you kind of disagree. It was like, but I think it was agreeing. But I feel like you were agreeing with me when you said the stove is still hot, because like as of right now, I'm just saying like when they go out into the world themselves, like you can do all that, but still you're still raising a black son. So when he goes out and just wants to like do something, he can experience something like immediately. I'm not saying you can't create a life where they can be away from, but it's still like we're on TV right now. We got politicians saying America's not racist.
Yeah.
Like and everything.
Crazy.
And it's like
defending it, not just saying
exactly.
Defending it.
And then it's like, because the one key thing I really thought about with the Civil War, like, because when Donald Trump said about the Civil War, and then when I really thought about it, like a lot of people really died, what they think in their honor, and like what and how they're immortalized, and with history, and but they're dying as heroes to some, but to enslave us.
Yeah.
Essentially, and like in those times, like so you died. So what? How am I supposed to feel
Right.
with that? Like, and that's what I'm saying. Like, life is it's gonna show you reality sometimes. Like, so that's why when
Yeah.
like you said the stove is hot, it's still like, hey, I can teach you all this and I can show you this and bring you around this. But still, when they're on there saying, and then you can even be in the household and believe that, oh, America's not racist.
Yeah.
But then when you go, you go in the wrong part of Mississippi, like
Right, it's different, right?
like-
I think it's interesting because you, like, to me, as y'all are talking, you're reminding me of, it was Ta-Nehisi Coates referencing James Baldwin, I believe, or maybe it was just Ta-Nehisi Coates in himself, but he was like, talking about the lie, and when do we decide to tell our children about the lie? And so the lie that America tells us that once you go out into the world, it's going to be the safe space, it's going to be this. But
The
we
American dream.
the American dream, right?
Yeah.
Is the lie. And so, like, when you are talking about raising a black son or raising a black daughter, how much of the world can you genuinely prepare them for, and how much don't you actually have control over that they're going to have to learn? And so, as parents, as mentors, as older people who are want to have a positive impact on young people, at what age do we begin to tell them, like, hey, they no longer see you as a child? What age do we begin to tell them, hey, this is how men could be, this is how women could be, this is how the state could be, right? Towards you. How long do we allow them to hold on to their youth? As parents, as teachers, whose jurisdiction is it for us to protect them as much as possible, but not let them be so naive to the world that they don't know what's going on? And then when they do experience, because at some point, like, we can't shelter them from everything, right? And so when they do experience that, how are we then able to show up on the other side? And that's what I think about.
And I think a lot of the things that do help, and I got this, like, when because a lot of time they bring up having a village.
Yeah.
And I see that helps a lot. Like, and that's why, like I said, you being a guest on this show, it helps still create that, like, hey, as long as we can still show a different way for the youth coming after us and show, hey, we can come together. That's the way we can help build, not so much as change the world, but you never know. It may. We don't know.
Change their world.
Yeah.
And to answer that question,
but
for
they
me,
we might spark the brain that changed the world. Quote from Tupac.
yeah, oh yeah, in fact, the whole world. But I'm saying,
did that.
even on to a village standpoint, their world is going to be completely different than my own.
Yeah.
And that mindset alone changes how I have to approach every decision I make with them, because it's not the same world. And to answer your question earlier, you brought up like the age. And I think we first start learning from history. You go from social studies to history in what, like 4th grade?
Man, I'm gonna be honest, they ain't teaching social studies as much.
No more. That's crazy.
It's really given elective at this point. Like, you can opt into the class if you want. Which
I
is,
swear it was social studies, then you got the history, but it was teaching you about the world where things
Yes.
were, even though that's a lie. But and I mean, hey man, every country can fit in Africa.
Yeah.
That's just, the globe is a lie. But teaching, once you like that age around there, like I think around those ages when you start to teach history is when you can educate so much on our children, on the world, and how to navigate that and the different responses to that. Like a lot of times you hear this, like again, this kind of a lie debate of Dr. X versus Martin Luther King, when both mindsets were real more similar than they were different. And it's understanding that when you have to act a certain way, and when you have to act this way, when and your kids learning new ways to approach things. Like for me, I experienced severe racism. Like I went to school in Bloomsburg.
oh, I was at Susquehanna, so we ain't too far out.
Hey, you know how I get. I've actually visited.
You had the
Susquehanna.
block parties. I get it.
I visited, yes, sir. Block parties and dorm room kick-ins, and that notion. I have a very jaded way to approach racism. Like it's a very violence first mindset, because it's life or death in certain situations. But I don't want my kid to have that mindset.
Right.
I'd rather you maybe be your B, not your A, and the A is more with just like, I know you don't understand nothing about society. Like even like.
I'm sorry,
Go
Jay,
ahead.
because when you said A, but you were talking about kicking the door in, I was like, B. B is like, you might get called a nigga here and there.
Hey, yo.
That's just about my man.
There's levels to it.
That's just how I heard
But
it.
great,
like,
even understanding how that word only gives it power when we react to it. So like if they say, yo, guess what? You can never get access to me again. And that is that. And you remove yourself rather than like I said, my response is more violence. Like, oh, it's that mindset to where if you could just change that course it's a better representation of how to handle these things as they come up. Now, of course, my son will be able to defend himself and understand the small scenarios in which a room can get that the tension can just be raised to a point to where it's nothing you can do.
Yeah.
But it's to hopefully lead that light and love first, and not so much of just the harshness that we carry with us.
Yeah.
But that all goes into me education of history. Like, once you understand that, these people will change the colors of pictures to make it seem like things were very much long time ago when we had full color movies at the time. So it's that understanding of where it's a different game being played, and they want us to respond that way. That's the picture they paint, so it helps them keep painting the picture. But if you then and change your brush a little bit, you can kind of elevate us to a different play, and that's what I'm hoping with the next generation.
Oh man, my boy talking over there. You better.
You bring a teacher here, man. Hey man,
We here.
bring a teacher here, man. Hey man,
okay, Jay. Like, I'm like, all right.
I gotta come verse, because when
just
we get to the
regular
parts
nigga
that we made, when we get to the parts that we may disagree on, which I seldomly teachers don't disagree with me on, like self-parenting and self-teaching your kids, and having and for a situation in life in a certain way to do so. In a school environment being not and one of for people who need it. Like, you can't miss work, so you can't be with your kid to teach them. You need that. But for those who can structure their life in a certain way to where your kid can learn directly from you is the best way to me. And bring in other educators as you do grow, but in their environment, not go into someone else's environment where there's 25 students to one teacher, and it makes it into a way to where you might you pick up so much habits from your classmates that you learn more from your students around you than you did the teacher sometimes.
Oh yeah, no, well, we know that to be true. Like, even for our generation growing up, we learned what they say, 70% from our peers in TV. Like, that's who we're learning from, right? Because if we're in school 8 hours of our day, 40 hours of our week, spending the other little bit trying to socialize for an after school program, so add on another 15 hours there. Then we go home, we eat, sleep, do it over again.
And now they have this.
And now we have now they have the phone, right? So now they have access to even more stuff, more readily available. So yeah, to an extent, they are learning to the world around them. And that's actually why even teaching now is a little bit more difficult, right? Because now kids don't have to work for information anymore. They don't have to like lean into rigor because everything is right there for them. And so me trying to teach a literature class is difficult because if they don't have historical context to like why this was written during the Harlem Renaissance and what they were trying to communicate, because they don't know the Great Depression happened, they're working out of World War I, they're leading up to World War II. They don't understand why history repeats itself, how art has trends, how all of this kind of works, right? And so for me, I think there's value in a parent being able to teach and understanding there's still a science to teaching, right?
Absolutely.
And so for me, I'm always like in the yes and kind of world when it comes to everybody should be involved in a child's education. And so yes, take them to school because students need to know how to socialize around other people, because they need to be able to be like, hey, do I know how to interact with a person is angry? Do I know how to interact with a different culture? Do I know how to interact with, right? And I'm noticing the interpersonal skills, the soft skills, those intercultural skills are actually missing from students who don't experience another world or a different perspective a lot of the time. And so those developmental years actually teaches tolerance in a different kind of way.
Which you can also get from different social aspects.
To
where your kid could be a part of a swim club where they interact with all across the world. Kids have their time to be that. You have different facilities where we tell your kids to play where they interact with different kids. But in that school setting environment, for me as a parent, it's very much it is too much unorganized chaos.
It's overstimulating.
So like I don't need my kid going into that environment to seek for the things we're discussing and get the complete opposite. Maybe met with where you're trying to collaborate, learning the race, and maybe met with that kid whose parents weren't so progressive in their teaching, and he might know a couple words that he shouldn't. And that alter my kid's life. Like I'm big on trying to avoid all the drama, all the trauma I can. So when he's my age and the way of the world is a completely different feeling to him. Whatever whatever that is.
And it's also making sure like when that happens, right? There are unintended consequences that come with that, right? Because if you are able to kind of teach your son like here's how this is and avoid like the traumas of the world and stuff like that, when something does happen to him, there's potential for it to be the most diabolical thing and life-altering thing because he hasn't had like those micro experiences to build up that tolerance potentially, right? And this is just off of assumption. I don't know how you're right. But I think that's like the added caveat too. And so I'm always going to be an advocate for school. I'm always going to be a huge advocate for parents being directly interacting with like their child's education and well-being and doing that because some parents don't have the time to be able to do it. And you already mentioned that. And then also it's wonderful when a teacher and a parent and a family and a community get to really have
Embrace,
that synergy together. Now, granted, it is the village. But it's also difficult too, right? Because there's schools are a business. You have to make sure so many seats are here. But it should also be a communal safe haven for a lot of people too. Like my child, schools hypothetically should be the safest place. We know kids are bullies. I taught seventh graders.
Well, not even the kids being the bullies. Without even the kids being the bullies, though, like when you send your kid into these certain environments where sometimes teachers aren't of their culture, don't come to that world. And they're placed in these situations to where they're more afraid of their students than the outside world. That presents a certain energy.
Which is why this is why it was so important to get like he's a black male teacher, and that's what they say. He said the percentage dropped potentially.
And I've been lucky. Like I've only worked in schools where the majority of teachers there were black men. Like that. Black people. Like I had black leadership. I had black people around me. We were teaching black children.
That's dope then.
And so I can say I'm privileged enough to have been in those spaces where it was curated. And I know, like...
So you're in the scenario what we're kind of talking about. Like, there was a community aspect.
Yeah.
You went to schools to where they felt they looked like you, the environment, the people there, probably your teachers were able to come and communicate.
Speak the language.
To where sometimes, in a larger spectrum, that is not the case for most sense.
Yeah.
And, damn, I just lost my point. Damn. All right, go ahead, Marquise.
And you also look like a figure. Like you may look like how you say, you may look like an uncle. You may look like a big brother to them. So they'll follow you and they'll listen to you.
Yeah, I mean, but low key, that comes with the other unintended consequences of me looking like a brother or uncle or a cousin because now they don't take. I have to work harder to get their respect to be their teacher.
Facts.
Yeah.
Because now they're looking for me to be that mentor more so than actually have to sit there and like, no, I need you to do this work. I need you to do this piece. So me early on in my education was more worried about like a positive impact on students, but I was like, no, I got to be a good teacher in order to have an actual positive impact on students before I can say I'm saving anybody. If I'm pointing to a table and calling it a bus, I ruined the kid's life. Like, and so I think to me, teaching is one of the scariest jobs in the world because there can be at any point where I can become the villain in that child's story. And that one negative interaction with me can color his interaction with the rest of the education system, can color their interaction with black male educators, can color how they might even feel like, the first place that I was rejected or dejected or felt harmed was by a teacher.
Was at school.
So then your relationship becomes a lot different.
And even in the fact of just the pay wage, like from what you speak of is somebody who takes a grand self-fulfillingness in what you do, which is what we want. Yeah. But then the pay doesn't equal that we want that. So you got hey, you see,
I was going to stay away from that alone. I was going to stay away from it, but
I can't for me because in those sense, these people like being compensated enough to take your job seriously is a real thing. So like having somebody teach your kid who is not receiving enough money to live is very contradictory to me though. And then then like Kat said, you're gonna say kid. Hey,
I was about to say, Kat,
I haven't got to say it. I put the clip in, guys. I put the clip in. But like just that thought process and those things that goes on into this world, to where like in my mind the goal would be eventually to probably like everybody shit on Umar, but building a school is a great and a life goal for me because you can fill it with people and you can pay people the right way so that now the learning that we are hoping for that you're speaking of taking place is kind of almost guaranteed because somebody is not worried about the other struggles of life while they're trying to teach the next generation.
Yeah.
Man, Give me some, my boy. My boy talking today.
Hey, yo.
My boy. See, look, I ain't gonna lie. I thought the conversation was gonna go, but maybe it's because you're a black man too.
Oh.
So like, because he's for. I mean, we all are, but he's for anything black. Like, so
if he was white.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. He was.
Well,
he was
it'll
like-
just be. It'd be a lot more of me probing, trying to
again,
understand more.
but I
But
think-
I understand you because we are similar.
Yeah,
And that's literally what I was about to say. And I think that's why it helps, why I think it's even better because he's a black educator male. And I think that's why, because he can see, like, we all can speak the same language.
Yeah.
And like, so we understand, we know he understands the same aspect. Like, he understands, hey, if I teach them wrong, I can mess up their life. But he also knows I'm an educator, but I'm still a black male. So I know, like, he agreed with me when I said, man, the politicians are saying there's no racism in America.
Yeah.
He like, what? Like,
Getting rid of
so you
but
understand
slavery
that,
from
like,
school books, like doing
but-
anything
so-
they can.
Yeah, but that's like the difficult part too, because I look at it and I also recognize not every black educator is a good educator.
Facts.
By us simply being there as representation, there's a higher chance of a black child staying in school and not wanting to drop out. That increases their chances by like 80-some%, right? But I also recognize, which is why I was just like, yeah, I think the issue is oftentimes when black people are told, and specifically black men, because right now we're a hot commodity. Like, yes, we got this percentage of black male educators in our schools. Da 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 da. It's a great statistic. It gives real admissions house. Like, look at all these black people we got. But in reality, there's some of us who are missing the science of teaching and actually doing like instructional development because we just need to fill bodies. There's a teacher shortage.
Can you explain the science of teaching? Like in a short, not
In a
like
very-
in
I got you.
Very
Very
short. You ain't got to
Well-
get fully
well-
unless you want.
Well, and also, is there a creative teaching style that you have as well?
Oh yeah.
After his question as well, like,
So I will say, like, what I had to learn before I could save students was understand the science of teaching. When I look at the science of teaching, that is understanding when you are delivering a lesson, can you see the students who understand it? Can you look at real-time data and say, great, 60% of my students get this, but there's a whole 40% that is not understanding, right? Does this mean I move on with the lesson or do I stay, right? And let this marinate and sit a little bit. Is there a time where I'm no longer doing the lift for students? So can I get to the point where I can now allow my students to lead the classroom? All I'm doing is simply serving as a guide or a facilitator. I'm no longer saying, and this is what you should know, this is what is objective, this is this. No, the style of teaching I love is when students take the lift on their own, and now I get to see how do they look at literature. When you look at this piece, what can you gather here based on the evidence that's provided, based on the context of the world at the time, based on what the author is trying to communicate, but also how are you receiving this? So oftentimes, like, what I'm big on is just like, I try to lead with curiosity in my classroom of just like, well, how'd you get to that thought? It might be the wrong answer, but tell me your line of thinking. So when a child is able to let you know, oh, I thought about it this way because of this, and here's the life experience that informed how I got here. Not quite, but I appreciate you sharing. And so instead of telling a child, you're wrong, you're dumb, this is now saying, thank you for sharing your thought process. I can see how you got here now. However, here's maybe a key detail that was missing in the line of thinking.
and that can
right.
just alter that whole learning process.
Yes.
That's a great way.
and I was going to ask to that point, does that help you learn the teaching style to have? Like, I know every student is different.
Yeah.
But does that help you? Hey, okay, now that I know this is their thought pattern,
Yeah.
I know how to move forward with how I teach them specifically.
Yeah, because whenever I teach a lesson to my first period class, they're my guinea pigs. Because like you have to, whenever you're lesson planning, you have to anticipate how can a student misinterpret what's going on, right? And so there's times where I can like think around, here's 3 ways that they could probably misinterpret this piece of literature. Cool. That may not always be the truth, right? At times, I'm just making an assumption based on the students that I have and the data that I've been presented.
Right.
However, if I get to the classroom and I'm just like, oh yeah, well, what does the woman walks into the ocean? What does this symbolize? They immediately, I'm just like, all right, so what does water symbolize? And sometimes I'm gonna have to say that. What does water symbolize in a religious context? What does water symbolize in a cultural context, right? This idea of a baptism, renewal, but some of them may not have that context. And so for that, there's times where they come in with different vantage points. And so now I have to teach them about motifs or do mini lessons and stuff like that. And so you got to do the visual piece. I gave them like complementary context. So sometimes I'd give students who were like auditory learners, hey, listen to this podcast or audiobook. Some students who can just simply read. And then there are students who just need to feel things or see things, right? So I have to think around, how do I craft a lesson to hit every single type of learner in my classroom?
You sound like a good psychiatrist, man.
Yeah.
As he was saying things, I was sitting there thinking, like, because I think I imagine a lot. So when he says, I'm like, so what does water mean to me? Like when I see that, like I pictured the woman walking in, I'm like, what would I say? Like, what would
Yeah.
it's like, but
Yeah, no, your relationship with those different elements definitely is a key fact of how you interpret things.
Yep.
I was gonna ask, like, so in all, because that's amazing to what I'm saying. But then, how do you gear a test? Because then it has to be across the board. Everyone has to get it. So in that way, that's kind of like also my thing as somebody that is high IQ based but hates test taking.
Child, that was me.
Like-
I hated it. But they're
Like-
necessary evils sometimes, and like in terms of like how you approach it. And so for me, I had a lot of students who had IEPs, right? And so they had to take tests differently, or I had to like and there are some people who like record their voice and they have to hear it being spoken out to them versus being able to sit there and read it, because the endurance just isn't what it used to be.
Right. I have you on my pod now because you said IEP and that got me into some Dr. Umar stuff. But that's a whole separate
conversation
for another day.
However,
but I'm curious.
Oh yes, because you talk about like the overuse of them.
We'll get into it another place. That whole thing I want to.
But whatever the case may be, it is important to understand. You may learn very different from me. You may learn different from me. I learn different than my 4 other siblings, right? And so understanding that, it allows a teacher to be able to show up better, because I recognize whenever test time was coming, this meant my student, who we weren't able to readily identify as being dyslexic, right? He got anxious, so every time a test would show up, or I'm like, we got to do a read aloud, he would start that his behaviors would show. So he acted out, so he had to avoid doing something that he knows he doesn't feel confident at, right? And so having to build those capacities are different. And so me understanding how to interpret IEPs or just learning styles in general allowed me to create a lesson that could hopefully maximize getting 80 to 85% of my students at least on the money. And then if there's other stuff I have to do on the back end, then I have to give them maybe a special test, or I have to sit there and take them in a small group so they can get read out the questions on the test, right?
Gotcha. No, that makes a lot of sense.
And what I love about when I hear you speak in this type of way, you care. I hear that you care.
Yeah,
like
there were days where I was exhausted.
I'm pretty sure, but like
that goes back to compensation because if things match, it makes you could do this more and be able to fully, like, maybe if now you great podcast, I watch some of your stuff, but maybe if you were fulfilled and teachers were our highest paid form of like just government job, then it would make that so much better for our kids in the world. And that way, taking that release off, you was kind of talking about earlier, and kind of what you were saying, like, I have a kid who learns differently. I learn differently, but even in your intelligence, you can harm yourself. Yeah. I can't spell word for shit, but that's because I memorized every single word just to pass the test in school. So I'm bringing home 100 because I don't want mom yelling at me like, "Nigga, how you spell apple?"
And then
I'm like,
and then it's gone.
All right, cool. Now I know. All right, it's copy paste.
Yeah.
All right, I'm done. I'm out. And that took me so far in life, but that was a result of just not being able to have anybody sit there and learn with me and help me in that.
You gotta
sense
learn
because,
beside your student. That's important. Are you learning with your student? And that was hard for me to have to get to that point. And I'm still technically like an early career educator, right? Like, I was in the classroom for 4 years, and now I'm in the higher ed space doing college access work. But like in that 4 years was rigorous teaching and emotional investment. And I did not. Last summer was the first time I ever took a summer off. But I was always teaching throughout the summertime. I was doing college access.
You didn't get the perk. That was the perk.
I know, but like
that's crazy.
You wanted the
perk,
but you realize I got paid through the summer to do nothing. So like if I can, I was like, I need to become a better teacher. I don't want this skill. I want to keep that skill sharp, right? And so for me, teaching over the summer made sense. It was extra bread on top of the bread I was already getting, but that was an extra $6,000-7,000 for the summer, right? And so, yeah, the compensation was necessary. Um, but I also was like, I'm still early in my career. I still have a lot to learn. So I was teaching primarily ninth and 10th grade, but I was still teaching fifth graders. I was still teaching sixth graders because teaching those earlier years are super foundational to understanding how students, when they get older, still learn. So yeah, lots of care, lots of intention, lots of time. But by my last year of teaching, I was burnt all the way out. I said, once I am no longer feeling like I'm the best possible educator for my students, I'm going to end up doing a disservice to them. So I knew that was time for me to leave the classroom. I'm going to return one day. Like that's just really going to always be that's the job I'll probably retire with if I don't become a professor, all of that good stuff. I love just teaching. But for right now, it's just like, oh yeah, you are not getting the best of Mr. Richards. So like I need to take a space away. And my students were very understanding. They were like, no, like your content is the space that you're in right now. This is what you love to do. And you need more time to be able to invest in it. So this job in higher ed pays me more, requires less time because, teaching high school means basketball games, football games, plays, musicals, concerts, all those other things. So like your time is not always yours.
Facts.
Yeah. So that's what I had realized I was doing. Instead of a 40-hour work week, I'm doing 60 hours, sometimes 65 hours, just to ensure like my kids had somebody there with them. So
Dope.
yeah.
I want to ask you, what makes a good leader to you? Like, what is good leadership in your eyes?
Somebody who listens. Like that's the most important piece. A leader who listens and is able to consider the most amount of people in their decision making. They're collaborative, but also understand that sometimes they have to make decisions that a lot of us aren't going to understand. And that took a while for me to learn, that there are a lot of decisions that our leaders make that we will never know about because it allows us to do our jobs and only focus on our jobs. Now for me, I definitely always add a caveat, like a transparent leader is also a good leader because that helps me empathize with you. It shows that you're vulnerable and it shows that I know how to trust you. So if you're doing all this stuff behind the scenes, that's great and all, but if you never tell me, or if there's never a space of understanding what you're accountable to, we're going to always be pointing at this leader boss in the ether and saying, this is the boss's fault, it's your fault, it's your fault. But in reality, there's probably a policy or a board that's in your way, right?
Yeah.
Like so many more people that your threshold of stakeholders is very different than mine. And so for me, I understand when, like, I was really big on, I do not want to be involved in any of these random searches or students having to get their bags searched, because for me, that just triggered me in a way that I was just like, nah, we're criminalizing our kids. But if there is somebody, you have to alert a bus, the schools, the parents, if there's potential for like a gun to be around you, it's a necessary evil, right? I don't particularly care to make that choice, and I don't want to be in a space where I have to make that choice because I think I understand the impact that has on my students. Like, I knew that day I would have to take a breather myself, but a lot of my students came in and said, yo, I feel like they're just criminalizing me. Like, I feel like I'm coming to school and they're immediately like, I got a target on my back. And so I had
to prison pipeline is real.
Yeah. So those are things that I think about more and more. As I think about a good leader, it requires transparency, vulnerability, trust building, listening, and learning how to adapt to different communication styles. I think it's probably like the top things for me, and a clear vision. Does everybody buy into your vision that you're also telling us? So I think those 6 components make for a good, strong leader who will keep a team that will last much longer.
No, facts. And one question off the, because I want to ask you some music questions before we get out of here, but what do you think is the ideal school week? Like, because like the school week to me is modeled a lot after the work week that was given to us, so that your kids, so you can work in my factory all day, so your kids, and now this is a place for your kids, so they're not with you back, because that kind of got kids out that farm culture time, just history in that sense. But as we progress, I feel like that whole picture has been altered and changed, and even like how you spoke, like your work week is really maybe a 70-80 hour work week at certain high just activity times of the year.
Could be, right? Yeah,
Right.
and that requires us to have some boundaries too as teachers. So they
Yeah.
knew. I said once I went home, I went home.
But like I think a 3-day
Yep.
a 3-day work week be great. I think a kid going to school 3 to 4 days, but in like an offset. So like it's time for it gives breathing room for a parent to kind of if they do have
Yeah.
the setup to be able to, because I'm saying that even though I think it is a lot of your self understanding your plight in the world and what you set up for you
Yeah,
to be able to give your kids time and things like that. Like everybody, again, 40-hour work week. Everybody is programmed to think, oh yeah, I got to go to work from 9 to 5,
Yeah.
8 to 4, and my kid's gonna be at school. Then and then when I got to get home, they got to eat, they got to do this, and that's just the way the pace. And when it doesn't have to be,
right.
that is that is something that you can change fundamentally depending on
Yeah.
what lane you go into.
Yeah,
But it's something that we don't really think about or talk about enough,
Mm-hmm.
and just the ramifications of having your kid kind of away from you more than they're with you.
yeah. No, I really love a lot of what you were saying. And I think if I'm looking at like an ideal school week, it's 4 days a week. So I'll probably do like a Tuesday through Friday situation, honestly.
Back, so you would want to be able to reinforce right after
Yeah.
yourself as a teacher. Okay.
Yeah. So I would say Tuesday through Friday is like a full school day, right? And so let it be, and honestly, it's 9 to 3. And then the last 3 hours of the day are for enrichment. And so that's for if you need homework help and you need that individual time, if you need to leave to do, if you have a job, but then also being there of like having pretty much a mandatory after school program too. And that to me is twofold, because if you're looking at crime that's happening, it's 14 to 22 is the age range that's committing most crime right now. And most times it's those hours right after the school time, right, that these things are happening.
Yeah,
And
those
so-
nomad time where your parents ain't home yet.
Yep.
You can wander the streets, do whatever you want to do.
Boom. But if you have them in a space from 3 to 6 after school, that gives the parent enough time to get home. That gives them enough time to make sure dinner's prepared. You have time to pick up your child. And now it's more like a safety, like, boom, I can get my kid. They can get back. They're as safe as possible. They don't need to take SEPTA. They don't need to have to go in these other neighborhoods, X, Y, and Z, and not be anywhere they're not supposed to be. So in an ideal world, that's how it would go. And then those Mondays would be those days for students who may need that one-to-one time, or parents to be able to check in, and teachers to get lesson plans done and get all the other minutia administrative work to get out of the way. Any meetings that are necessary would be ideal. But that also gives space for like potentially like a 3-day weekend, or if you're ahead, I was really big on just being ahead of my lesson plans. And so I was just like, yeah, if I'm ahead and I don't need to come in and I can do a virtual meeting, great. But that's the only thing that I'm necessarily like obligated to that day. Still get paid for a full work week, but also understand if you use your time right, it's you pretty much have Friday night to Saturday to Monday off. And then if students actually need that extra time, we can provide that scaffold in there for students who may need that one-to-one or small group stuff that we may not always get because of the current conditions of classrooms being 25 to 30 students, when in reality, I wish they were like 12.
Yeah, facts.
Yeah.
Facts.
And just one quick question.
Yeah.
What would you like to see the parents do more of?
What would I like to? I would love to see the parents be able to. Honestly, it's capacity building. Like I would love to see parents have a little bit more actual space to be part of their kids' educational journey. But I think that's twofold, because I don't know if teachers are always. You're good. I don't know if teachers are always like understanding how to build capacity for parents, so parents know exactly what to ask as they're part of those educational journeys, right? And so that has been like my big thing around parents being able to be more involved, but parents also understanding like what questions to ask, so you don't know what you don't know as a parent all the time.
And I think that's why I'm just a little on the fence with the homeschooling thing.
Yeah.
Because it's like, yeah, your parent can help and they can be more hands-on, but sometimes if they don't have the criteria of like that you have, or and how do we really know they're getting educated properly at home? So
That's
okay, you see now. But how do you but we know they're not being educated properly at certain schools and certain systems. So it's kind of I feel
I
like
see what you're saying.
that's the same side of a coin to me. I think it's part of the education. If you're a parent like me who chooses to educate their child yourself, you have to go and get those educations. So if you're at the point to where your kid's at, let's say geometry, you have to, before they get to the geometry, you have to make sure you learned enough to get there, or partner yourself with someone who does, and they now bring the educator into the kid's environment of how they've been learning their whole life. Like homeschooling doesn't just mean me, myself, and me and my partner teaching my kid. You can have different community aspects involved into that, to where, hey, like my best friend is a math savant. So when it comes to math, it would be bringing him, but not having my kid go to a building and figure it out, and it be in his environment where he's comfortable, where he likes to learn, and he gets the information. I'm able to collaborate with this person. We're all together teaching this lesson, so where it's and able to give it enough time to understand, manifest, and be able to redo that at their own speed. So that it's not just a quick of like you got to move across these benchmarks to make it throughout your year to get advance to the next year.
Yeah,
Well,
oh, go ahead.
I was going to ask, what do you think? What's the most you taught your son, like as far as like on that path?
Oh I taught my son like addition and subtraction like at 2.
Yeah,
Like just going to sleep and counting and subtracting numbers, adding numbers. Off of just that, to where he's ahead of the game, and then myself, I'm very well versed in math as well. So that's kind of our lane where I can kind of get his brain working a little different. My son has a very large knowledge of just like engineering itself. Like he can see something and recreate it like that, spot on, almost a detailed model. Like he built a Play-Doh train yesterday, and we was like, "Wow, that's a little bit too good." It's those stuff, but it's that because I'm with him and I understand him enough to kind of aid in those things to where now when I'm teaching things, a train might be involved in it because that is his catalyst for interest right now.
Oh yeah, he loved trains.
so I think that no, for real. But I think that's like, it's a really good, like you're able to do that. But not every parent, and I would say, and not every parent has the privilege to be able to do something like that too. And I think that's like such a hard space to be in, right? Because we have to understand a parent is just a human with kids.
Yeah,
and like there is still needs.
And every situation isn't like his. Like you see, he got like they're raising the child together. Like that's how my household is. We're raising the child. Like they our children have both parents. They got grandparents. They have they have all that and like and the hands on.
So, but in you saying that those things do exist. So like even on these scenarios, I was saying to his thing where every parent might not have that ability. To me, it's that for me, that's why I pod and do this to help change parents' ideas of how you can control your time,
right? And
just the field you get into and understanding that it's not. My kid is not a traditional work. Like he can learn while working with me. Like it's different ways to approach it, not to where it's just like a gift. And the life we set up is beautiful, but it's not just that aspect of it. It's the fact that we thought this out, and again, like I came into a partner who was already fully off the full entrepreneur, full self, everything, full able to go and create whatever they need or go get it, and there is different systems in place to make life not as like I ain't up yet, I'm trying to get there, but to make life just a way that is more of fact of he did not choose to be here.
Because
me bringing you into this world is me giving my life to you, so that I have to make this a life for you,
because I was just speaking to like when we're saying like how we're able to be more hands-on because we have the partnership, we have the help, like and we have that mindset. But what about the parent that definitely, well, they wouldn't be homeschooling, of course, but I'm just saying, but somebody who's like also struggling financially and all, and they can't even focus completely on trying to help you because they're like, man, I gotta figure this stuff out. I can't figure this out for you.
And so that's what I try to always have grace for. I know a lot of teachers, it's a lot of our grapes too, like, dang, the parent needs to be more involved, And it's the caveat, not every parent has an ideal setup, and it can be happen from life circumstances.
Exactly.
We know we can name all the things, mass incarceration,
everything.
They're not getting paid enough, X, Y, and Z, have to work multiple jobs because the first job that they have, though it provides them benefits, it doesn't give them enough to be able to sustain a household.
And that's what I was going to say. Like when you said in between there, like where they get off at 6 and all, I'm like, some, they got to work.
And some are doing
different, like, so they can't, they gotta.
So the
they're not
education
always
needs
there.
to come be, how do you figure out how to make your life work for you and not just work your life? Like it's set up for you to work until
Ooh, that boy talking over there. Okay,
But no,
all
but
right.
for real though, this is shit I really
that.
like. I deeply care because society is set up a way for you to work yourself to death. I manage a location still in everything I do, and I got a woman who's trying to make it to 65 to retire.
Yeah.
And it's
About to come back up
understanding.
here, this boy talking.
I know
Some
he's
stuff.
talking.
Like,
But it's understanding like, yo, this like her whole life was taught that this is the right way, and experiencing me and different people and how I speak is so much of a earth shattering thing to her sometimes that it's overwhelming because it's like, wow, I wish somebody would have said that. Like even like to a extent of a 401k being the thing. And even a pension, those things that we saw jobs now have the ability to take away. Corporate America does not care for you.
Yeah.
That's a lie. Like again, my ideal world is more mom and pop shops.
No, and you talk about abolitionists over here. Okay, I don't believe capitalism saving anybody. And if I'm gonna keep it a full bean,
I'm gonna get this money.
right? I really don't. And I have to understand at the same time, though ideally my abolitionist world is what you were talking about. But in reality right now, under a world where we experience capitalism and have to survive it, there is a concession where ideally I would love if parents were able to be so much more involved and were able to be able to create this, because I think it becomes now a conversation of like personal responsibility and accountability versus then in that same conversation of personal accountability, do we then absolve white supremacy and the capitalist world that we exist in as well from the conditions that were created, right? And so for me, yes, I absolutely want to be in a space where I can reimagine all of that. And our current situation, I can't currently blow up the entire education system because what happens to the families who actually need us to be in these these rooms, right? What happens to the kids who are not getting as much don't have access to resources, because school is not just about education. Some of us are feeding children breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right?
Yeah.
Like
No,
these are very real things. They're getting
Facts.
access to spaces that they may not always have access to, right? And so the potential to have a much more streamlined idea of where, if they choose to go to college, like they have much more of a streamlined access to this thing. And so I think right now the world we live in, and I love the world that you have created, is a yes and possibility model right now. So how do we exist in the world that we are today? And how do we also become those parents who can say, yes, you built this train, let's curate some stuff right after when you get home for time. So my urge, I think, which would be really cool, is though a parent may have to work a double sometimes, like that was my mom's situation, single mom, 5 kids. My mom had to be Superwoman. So we understood what concessions needed to be made, even if we didn't get it as kids. Now, me being on the teacher side, I understand what my students need, because now I see my students come up as mentees and they're like, yo, Mr. Richards, thank you for like what you were able to provide me, because all I needed was consistency. My urge to parents, what I love about what you're saying is, can parents at least spend 1 hour of their day investing in some form of education for their kid, no matter what the education looks like, but some form of education with their kid, whether that's reading to them, whether that's doing, I did Sudokus and crossword puzzles with my pop. Like that's what helped me keep my brain sharp. And so think around different creative ways to entice education and learning and rigor and discipline, build the endurance, even if you can only do it for 30 minutes to an hour each day. But that connection with the parents as an educator and your actual trained educators, your disciplined educators, professionals, are also going to be serving as an additive. So we create a foundation for a parent who may need to be the additive piece, or can we both co-create this foundation of what education can look like as lifelong learners to outside of just the classroom space? Because I don't think the classroom is the only place to get education. My dad was in prison for 24 years, and that man is one of the smartest people I know, right? So two things can exist at once.
And he went in like that time period he was away, he still kept his mind sharp and learned in that very hectic environment.
Yeah.
And right now we're speaking about parents who are in hectic environments, but you still have to give yourself time to learn and better yourself. And that's the part I feel like we're missing for some parents, education. Like, yo, right now you at work 12 hours a day, but today work 12 hours is different than back in the day. It's not a factory, it's steel mill. You're not chopping your finger off. You might be on Instagram for, let's say, 4 hours of your shift.
Okay, stop playing
But
with it.
you could take that time and either learn more about just how to free yourself from the surroundings you're in, whether that be through financial literacy, whether that be through education, whether that be through different things, and even understanding the social media you're on and what it's for. Like, I do not look at like social media as a vice or release. It's a business.
Right.
It's marketing. It's America. Like that. It's America taking marketing from just your TV screens and benches to your everyday life, kind of
programming every day.
fed into you.
Yeah.
So if you understand that, you can kind of work that better for yourself.
Yeah.
Like, it's parents right now that find a way to change their whole situation off of just selling platters on Instagram.
Oh no, but that's facts, right?
And that's just the education I'm saying. You might got to figure that out for yourself as a parent.
And I think
to give yourself some freedom.
It's understanding like the plan too, right? Like, I knew college was an investment for me to know off rip. Anytime I look for a job now, I'm not making under 40,000, right? Now I'm higher than that now. However, I look at other people that I grew up with who didn't have the opportunity. I'm like, college is just a long-term investment of if it's just a pure economic decision to make a certain amount of bread, right? Now that comes along with it, the ghetto.
And that's also a lie.
Okay,
college does not come with no real money.
Child,
Until you like a few degrees in.
However, I can say college provided me access. College provides me the ability to do my podcast on a regular basis because of the money and the security and the PTO and the flexibility versus some of my friends who have to go to the factory job every single day, work weekends, do doubles, and it's not like they're getting the same check every single week. So I think around like, what are the different things that come with a simple investment, right? Yeah. Again, but I chose college as a decision. But
you're speaking as you as somebody of being employed by the university, not funding the university.
Oh no, I ain't not. I'm gonna fund my podcast. I ain't funding no university.
But I'm saying technically you did,
huh?
Technically you did.
Did what?
You were a student.
Yes, I was
a college student. So they got paid a tuition every year for you to be there. That led to their business model. That's how the world goes that's what I'm saying.
Yep.
That's why the investment has to not be the like I'm big on a year gap, like to figure out your life and what you want. As somebody who didn't do that and kind of went to college off of my brother was like, it's cool, it's lit, slide. All right, we there, and didn't understand the ramifications of what I was doing. And that time, and even understanding that the major I was majoring don't make no money. Gotta shout my man out.
I told you I went to school for video production and theater. What am I doing?
Kanye quote.
That's my guy.
Yeah.
But I definitely agree with the cultivating at home, because the way I do it as well is like, well, for one, we got certain learning games too, and my daughter has a library of books, like, so
keep them on the STEM tab on TikTok too.
Yeah, but we got like, so right now we're learning spelling, reading, and everything. It should be for next month. But
no, I'm happy you do that. So
like, but the other way how I do it creatively is I'm also a children's book author. So
I saw that.
Yeah, so I basically try to cultivate the self-esteem aspect of the belief system of, hey, you can do this. Hey, you can always tell yourself this, like the self-affirmation as well. Like you know you're smart and you can believe that, especially for us and like me, because I'm big on what my legacy will look like.
Yeah. Not
just about how I'm gonna look, what my legacy, like what will come from me. Did I take care of my family and my village, anybody, whether I'm here or not, whether I'm on earth or not. So I know this can be instilled in, hey, this is all I need you to know, because as long as you know that you can believe in yourself, that you are smart, that you are strong, that you are beautiful, as long as you believe that, you can do anything. Facts. You can accomplish anything. And that's how I try to cultivate, because those are the things I feel like, just me personally, if I had more of that, like I would probably say what word am I looking for? Like the reassurance.
Yeah. If
I had the reassurance in my life constantly, I can see how long, because I've seen how in adulthood how far it's been taking me, and I'm just getting it in my 30s.
Yeah.
So that's why it's like a wait. And then we know children learn, like they're complete sponges from the time they're born. They're like definitely the 5 years old. So I'm like, okay, let me get this belief in. So it's like those type of things where, like, I know we're talking a lot about education, but I'm also like in the belief of what you seeing yourself.
Yeah, and
to
it's
help
that
me.
it's that reflection. Like I love to be a mirror to my students because I also get to affirm them at the same time. And I think that's the other piece that a lot of people forget is not using deficit language when it comes to children. Like just simply like I tell them to focus up, right? And I'm just like, cool, now you get yourself ready, you are good to go. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Thank you for your line of thinking. Thank you for this. And so it's always a space of I appreciate you. And my big thing is I start my class. I have a quote that stays on my thing that I tell my students, I don't need you to be perfect, but I want you to try.
Right. Exactly.
As long as you are able to try. But so many kids today have been like, oh, no, this was wrong. This was wrong. You failed. You failed. You failed. No, you're just thinking differently. And so how did you get to that line of thinking? And I'm going to meet you where you're at. That's my job as a teacher, is to meet you where you're at and to cultivate and refine more and more. So.
But yeah, like what I like about this is why it's so important is because it's like, again, we're all pretty much the same. We all have the same story pretty much. Like even how you just said, like you had a single mother and there's 5 of y'all. Your father was in locked up for 24 years, but it's still like that didn't make you didn't make the excuses. And that's what we're about, like moving forward. Like you said, focus up. Like and I feel like that's more of an analogy, not just focus up, like just telling you get focused. Like, focus up. Don't get focused on the distractions. Don't get focused back. Focus up. Like keep moving forward.
Yes, sir.
But man, talk about Keeping It a Bean podcast.
Oh man, Keeping It a Bean is really like a rebranded podcast, to be honest. So it was originally This American Negro. Yeah.
That's the name.
Thank you. So that's when I get into like my video essay components, where it's just like me doing my thing. Very much so is like when I tell people I'm in my This American Negro bag, I'm doing analysis, all of that. But my big thing was like, how do I bridge academia in the hood? Now, This American Negro is not always the most marketable name. So I said, you know what? This is the only time I'm ever gonna make a concession. But I said, Keeping It a Bean, it allows you to still have like a little bit of culture to it. Like I'm gonna keep it a buck with you. But it's a space where I get to bridge academia in the hood. And it's really my mission of being able to allow my circle, my peers, people that I'm intrigued by, tell stories. Something I believe to be true is like storytelling is the best way to form empathy, is the best way to get transformation and build community, because I don't need to preach at you about a lot of stuff, but you relate to the story that's being told. Right. And so though we may not have the exact same upbringing, there is something about this person that has shaped who I am, that has informed who I am. And so how do I create that space? So what I do is try to replicate some of my favorite experiences, and that's at a bookstore or a coffee shop. I sit down with a cup of coffee or tea. I've had 7-hour, 8-hour conversations with random strangers, friends, all in that environment. But that's one of my personal favorite environments. So I get to now. I got a cool little coffee sponsor, which was really sweet.
Oh man!
But it's stuff like, but for real, but it's stuff like that where I'm just like, oh, I get to bring all the things that I love: intellectual prowess, honest storytelling and conversation, laughter, coffee, conversation, right? Dissection, challenges, all of that. And so, that's really what my big thing is with Keeping It a Bean. But this is probably my 4th podcast that I've had. So it's been just a evolutionary thing. I've been podcasting for 7 years.
We've all been there.
Yeah. Number one thing of that though is you stay with it. You stay consistent. You just you might have to recreate, rebrand, redevelop, but you kept going.
Yeah.
And that's the only way to make it in this business.
And it honestly expanded what I was able to talk about. So many people saw me as like the social justice guy. So they know I'm the abolitionist, burn it all down. I'm out at protest. I'm like looking and critiquing regularly. But this gave me a space. For so long, that's how people only saw me. But I'm like, no, I'm a good time. I'm dead funny. Stop playing with me. And I wanted to give back into that space. I said they know the intellectual side of Marquise, but they don't always get to see my boys. Like I got with that interview with B and Cody was one of my favorites because I was just like, oh, you get to see me just bro out for a little bit. Like, yeah, we're gonna talk around like reflecting on the year and what we're excited about next year, but everybody's so used to me being in like a very particular pocket with social political analysis where like now I get to talk to my niggas and we get to do some cool stuff. I get to just chill out.
That's what it's all about.
And I definitely always feel like that's the main struggle I have with pod and like just me personally, because I was like, man, like people may see my clips and they may think I'm just a stickler all the time, and I'm like, man, I like to have fun, I like to talk shit, I like to do that. But I was like, but sometimes I just think I just get so focused on what the message is on camera that I want to be seen, but I don't want to dehumanize myself either.
And
like
that's where I fell into, because more people were just like, I would love for you to just talk about, social issues. I would love for you to talk around like black masculinity, all of that stuff. And so I was able to really cultivate a space where instead of having to kind of be preachy, I kind of just model what it looks like. And so many people have been reaching out, which is like, thank you for showing me what what black men could experience. I showed your podcast to my husband. I showed my podcast to my son. I really wanted to show this to my students. Like, I think this is super important because of what conversations you're having, Marquise. And so once that had become like consistent feedback of just like, thank you for showing what black masculinity could look like, how you can expand that idea, showing other black men in this space was super important. And so that's why, like, to me, part of it is my podcasting is always going to be mission driven, but I've been excited to see the impacts that may not have been directly tied, but now that I get to really show black masculinity, do a modeling and not just always an analysis, it doesn't feel like men are always feeling under attack, but it feels like they see themselves represented in different ways.
And I do appreciate, and that's why I'm glad we have someone like you, because we're about the same things. Like, we're okay with saying, like how I just said, we're both raised in families in a household like where it's like we created that 2-parent household for us, like where we're like, yo, we don't have baby moms. Me and him, he only has one child, I only have one child, and like I'm married, and like and it's not a shot at him or nothing, like, but it's like they have a where my ring at?
This nigga did not just do that. No, my girl behind the this is conspiracy. This is a conspiracy.
He said,
all right, they set this up. This was a plan. As soon as he sits that down, I'm gonna get this nigga. Hey, yo, where's the ring at?
She's right there. That's why I was like, it's hard to not make it sound like that, but it's just more like we're creating the unit, and it's okay to say, hey, we don't have baby moms. Like we don't have that. We're building healthy relationship. We're trying to show it's okay to love properly as black men. That's why everything is like. That's why I said, like, with you being up here, this is important, because, and I learned a lot too, because I get to have a real conversation as a grown man with another, with an educator, especially one that like we're from the same background. Like, so, but man, like, is there anything else you want to leave us with, man?
Oh man, just thank you,
man. Appreciate you, man,
having me here. I really just enjoyed this conversation for so many different reasons. No, seriously, like, it was a space to just chat. It was dope getting to know all three of you. The laughter that came before the show, like, this is such a comfortable space to be in. But
thank you. Shout out Prolific Studios.
We appreciate that. Comfortable space to be in, but I also appreciated discourse that didn't end in disrespect. I don't think all three of us always aligned on every little thing that we were saying, but I think we were able to speak to different perspectives that give a much more roundabout answer, which I think, and it's more complicated than just what we were saying too.
Oh yeah.
So I love that we're in a space of still processing publicly, and like what this was for me. So I appreciate it. I feel fulfilled on this good old Sunday.
Same.
Yeah. So no, just thank y'all for having me. Other than that, you already know that do you want me to pitch my stuff now?
Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. All right. So this is your boy Marquise Davon, Keese, This American Negro, Never Mark. You can catch Keeping It a Bean pod. Every episode drops on YouTube on Sundays. The audio drops on Monday mornings. You can also catch my other podcast that I host with Skip from BK called Heavy is the Crown. It's a Bel Air recap podcast. So if you need a support group for that show, let's keep supporting TV and black television in itself. You already know what it is.
And and black independence.
Yes. Okay.
But we thank y'all for tuning in to the King Status Podcast with me, your host, Mr. Mortar King, along with my guy, Mr. Prolific over there, Mr. J. Duce himself.
Hey, yo, he introduced me. Hey, yo. You already know who it is, guys. Mr. Prolific, aka J. Duce.
If I do say so
myself.
We thank y'all for tuning in, and remember, nobody can fit the crown that's meant for you. We'll see you next week.
I love that. That was smooth.